I'm Susan Klosterhouse, Vice President of Science and Certification at the Cradle Products Innovation Institute, and I have the pleasure of moderating our first panel today. We're so happy that you've been able to join us. Our first panel is entitled Turning Commitment into Action and Impact, How to Demonstrate and Validate Leadership for the Circular Economy. In this session, we'll be hearing from 3 Cradle certification holder companies about where we are today with regard to the transition to a circular economy and the role of the Cradle certified program in this transition. We'll also hear from our panelists about their experiences thus far with the newly released Cradle certified product standard version 4 and what they've learned from its implementation. And lastly, we'll discuss how third-party certification systems can bring value to companies in the transition to a circular economy. Before we start our discussion, I'd like to first set the context for why this topic is so important and what drives our work at the Institute. Today, the global economy is only 8.6% circular, and just 2 years ago, it was 9%. The urgency and need for a circular economy is clear. The 2021 Global Circularity Gap Report, published by Circular Economy, states, to keep our world livable and thriving, we need to double global circularity from 8.6% to 17%. In addition, much of our global climate crisis is the result of a take-make-waste extractive economy. Efforts to simply be more energy efficient and use more renewable energy are important. However, they can only address about half of the greenhouse gas emissions. A bigger step change is clearly needed, and the circular economy can contribute to completing the picture of emissions reduction by transforming the way that we make and use products. And so achieving this transformation requires a paradigm shift, a shift toward cradle-to-cradle thinking where all materials are intentionally designed for their next use and are actively cycled in either a biological or technical cycle. And this shift requires rethinking and redesigning products as well as the systems we use to make them. With materials that contain only safe chemicals and that are actively recovered and processed for their next use via those intended cycles, waste as we know it would no longer exist, and a higher quality of materials would be available for cycling into new products. And it's with this visionary goal in mind that we developed and recently released the new Cradle certified product standard version 4. Version 4 has been designed to be the most advanced one standard solution for verifying products that are safe, circular, and responsibly made. We've developed version 4 and the Cradle certified program as a whole with a focus on ensuring it represents rigor, leadership, and transparency at its core. With regard to the new standard, it is based on the most recent scientific understanding and advancements, and we used a rigorous development process that provided opportunities for stakeholders to engage in the process through participation in a variety of advisory groups, as well as 2 public consultation periods. The certification process itself is based on a robust certification scheme that is aligned with certification best practices, as well as ISO 17065, which enables Cradle certified to provide third-party verified assessments of products that are in compliance with the standards. Lastly, Cradle certified is also an open access and transparent program, meaning that all of our standard and methodology documents are publicly available on our website. Okay, now for those who are new to Cradle certified, it's important to note that the standard is a holistic multi-attribute framework, and we have 5 requirement categories that are based on the Cradle design principles, and which also focus on the applicant and company or brand, as well as its supply chain. A product and its applicant company need to meet the requirements in all of these categories in order for the product to be certified. The first 2 categories address the materials in the product. These are material health and circularity. These ensure that materials are safe for people and the environment, and they also enable a circular economy through regenerative product and process design. The other 3 categories address how the product is made. They aim to protect clean air, promote renewable energy, and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Also safeguard clean water and healthy soils. And lastly, respect human rights and contribute to a fair and equitable society. And in addition to being a multi-attribute standard, what distinguishes Cradle to Cradle Certified from other standards is that it is designed to be a pathway to measurable improvements and optimization. Products are certified to one of 4 levels, depending on where they are in their optimization journey. These levels are bronze, silver, gold, and platinum. Under version 4, a product can be certified at the bronze level for a maximum of 4 years. Also, recertification must occur every 2 years, and measurable improvement must be demonstrated in order to recertify. And the goal for this is to ensure that companies are optimizing their products over time and striving for innovation in order to reach the platinum level, which represents the ideal, fully optimized cradle-to-cradle product. And lastly, we've designed the new Cradle-to-Cradle Certified version 4 standard to be a comprehensive framework that enables companies to drive systems change by first prioritizing action for optimizing their products and manufacturing systems across the 5 key sustainability focus areas. Secondly, enacting roadmaps for making changes from product innovation to operations. Third, transforming business models, systems, and collaboration throughout the value chain. Fourth, measuring progress along the product and company optimization journey. Fifth, verifying sustainability performance. And lastly, leading industry transformation towards a safe, circular, and equitable future. And with that, it's my great pleasure to introduce the members of our first panel for today's event. Our panelists are true sustainability leaders who have been leading the charge on driving the systems change through their many years of participation in the Cradle to Cradle Certified Products Program, and also more generally by spearheading the transition to a circular economy through their work. In addition, our panelists are all participants in the Cradle to Cradle Products Innovation Institute's version 4 pilot program and demonstrating their leadership by being among the first to transition their certified products and companies to meeting the requirements of our new standard. So please welcome first Rachel Berkin, Sustainability Program Manager at Mecho, the leading manufacturer of commercial window covering systems. Tim Glaz, Head of Corporate Affairs at Brenner and Mertz, a family-owned German company for cleaning, personal care, and home care products. And Candi Hampton, Product Sustainability Manager for Shaw Industries Group, the world's largest carpet manufacturer and global provider of floor covering. So welcome, Rachel, Tim, and Candi, and thank you so much for your participation in our panel session today. For those in our audience, if you have any questions that come up during our discussion, we invite you to please submit those questions to us using the questions box, which is on the right side of your screen, and we will try to get those answered during the Q&A time following our panel discussion. Okay, let's get started. I'd first like to talk a little bit about the transition to a circular economy and the role of the Cradle to Cradle Certified program in that transition. We'll start with Candi. Where do you see the current circular economy discussion today?
The global pandemic has re-escalated the conversation around single-use items, with a surge in waste generated from takeout containers, PPE like masks for the masses, and other disposable items. It's really no longer a matter of if we should be committed to circular economy, but instead needs to be a movement on how to make circularity both more feasible and easier, and that truly starts with product design. Circular design encourages us to rethink business models, how we make our products, and to consider the systems surrounding them. But we also have to consider the materials that we use to ensure that those resources can be used again and again. Committing at inception to create a sustainable product that is able to be disassembled and reutilized in a valuable way fosters critical development that plans a pathway for circularity. Materials do matter. Ingredient selection is fundamental to ensure that a finished product is safe for people and the planet, and yet must also provide feasibility of continued utilization. Not all materials are fit for circular economy. Products need to be designed with the end in mind, ensuring a viable method to disassemble or break down the product in such a manner that allows for cycling value. And understanding the life cycle of the product, there needs to be a reverse logistics plan established. It has to be both feasible and easy for the end users to return the used product in a way that allows for disassembly and cycling. And then while designing for circularity in new products is crucial, it's also imperative that we look at the products that are in the marketplace today and innovate new processes to cycle these existing products in ways that bring value and divert discarded materials from our landfills. Plastic bottle recycling is one that comes to the forefront of my mind, where plastic bottles are collected and cycled, not back into drink bottles, but into new products like flooring.
Okay, thank you. My next question for you, Tim, what do you feel is currently missing from the common circular economy thinking today?
What I find that is really missing is the combination of ecology and economy, because circular economy often is placed in the environmental corner. So people are kind of figuring and trying to develop solutions that are very and only looking into the environmental issues. And I think it's important to take the economy and the whole businesses with you in this journey. And to do so, you need to develop sustainable business models. Because only in the combination of both economy and ecology, you will prevail with whatever you develop. So I think it's a really key matter around circular economy's collaboration. So we could develop the best possible solutions without a collaboration in the value chain, you will get nowhere. So you really need to look into your partnerships and develop and strive for often improving them, because often the situation is that the buyers and the sellers are sitting in a room and not the R&D people that talk about how could we become more cradle to cradle in the solution for our products and our ingredients. And that's really complex. It's not easy. We went through the whole process with our Recycling initiative, and we figured, and when we really had the experience, that you had to come over strong barriers because there is reluctance to work together in this kind of open way. And lastly, and that's a point that's of course also important if we talk about business cases, we need a clear legal framework. We need a clear setting set by the government to also incentivize circular models. Because right now we are facing the situation that if you take plastics, raw oil last year, you were given money if you would make a contract. So it was so low, the price, it went up now, okay, but it's very volatile, and we need to plan for the future, and we need to know where we're going and what the government is really wanting. So we need a clear commitment from the government side to incentivize circular models, including also the transfer and the transformation that is necessary. Thank you.
Okay, Rachel, how does Cradle to Cradle Certified redefine and future-proof the circular transition?
First, I want to thank you all for having me here today. I'm very excited to be a part of such an esteemed panel of experts. I'm going to be, using my C2C V4 experience to help answer some of these questions. And just a little bit of background. So Mecho is a manufacturer of manual, motorized, and automated shading systems, and we're focused in the commercial market. So we've earned full certifications and also material health certificates for both hardware systems and textiles. So circular economy, for us, it's more than just that recycling part, right? It's the holistic narrative, which is embodied within Cradle to Cradle certification, right? So it looks at, with V4, it looks at environmental policies, material health, the circularity, social fairness, the clean air and water, and then of course, water and soil stewardship. And the unique aspect of Cradle to Cradle version 4 in our situation is that it brought many stakeholders of our organization together to discuss each of these sectors, including EH&S, supply chain, engineering, product, manufacturing, and HR. So each department, even if they typically work in their own silos, were brought together in order to complete the V4 certification requirements. So circular economy can be a very vague term, but by defining requirements, our organization was able to collaborate and assess where we stood regarding each requirement. And I'll be honest, we did well in some areas and not as well in others. But that's the advantage of C2C. It enables a process for continuous improvement and for the ability to set concrete goals with each stakeholder for the next certification cycle. So our next step is to look at where we may not have excelled, and I need to meet with each stakeholder to understand what do we want to work on and improve for next year. So the ability to work off of an actual standard versus a loosely defined concept enables each stakeholder to assess costs, time management, and the benefit of these improvements to our overall corporate sustainability goals.
Great. Okay. Next, it would be helpful if the three of you would please tell us about your experiences thus far working with the new version of the Cradle to Cradle Certified Product Standard version 4. Rachel, you've already started off with that. Thank you a little bit about that. But can you elaborate on what did the version 4 pilot teach you about your products and the value chain? And how are you integrating these newly gained insights into your approach to business and product development?
Yeah. So for context, I think it's important to outline which products we certified under version 4, right? So we submitted a product called Whisper Shade IQ2 AC and DC motorized shade system. So it's essentially the hardware components of a motorized shade system. And it was the first time we submitted this product for Cradle to Cradle. So it had never undergone the material health vetting or any other, which I think, so it was quite a beast. It's a complex assembly with infinite configurations and a motor. So it includes everything, such as plastic, steel, aluminum, the motorized components. Our textiles are documented separately. And, I think one other thing to think about is that there's no such thing as a standard window size. So there's no such thing as a standard window shade size. So everything is modular and customizable. What I think is most poignant about the question is not what we, the sustainability team, learned about our products and process, but more importantly, what did other members of our organization learn? As I previously mentioned, the new C2C V4 standard is an interdisciplinary process that encourages participation from multiple stakeholders. And one of the most valuable components of the process was actually a circularity training for our entire staff. Since this was part of the pilot, we partnered with the Institute to complete this training. It was scheduled for March of 2020 in person, but obviously that was a very fun month for everyone. And we had to do a quick pivot to a virtual setting. So we did it virtually with marketing, our product and textiles team, and our engineering team. So each of these teams has worked with C2C for many years. For example, engineering relies on the version 3 ban list and now the version 4 restricted substance list as a part of our material vetting process anytime we specify new materials for our hardware systems. But by conducting the circularity training, we change the vantage of how our teams need to start thinking about our systems design. What we found is that often the values of circularity clearly aligned with many of our own values. Designing for upgrade, maintenance, disassembly. These were all important to our design process. So now, especially our engineering team is well aware as to how each of these concepts can impact fully circular systems and what their impact is on the future broader initiatives of the organization related to product circularity. Excellent.
Okay, Tim, what do you think made implementation of version 4 successful at Werner and Mertz, and how can this success be replicated at scale?
Well, basically, as a piloting company, we were challenged. Obviously, although we already are a cradle-to-cradle company for several years, and we have over 60 products already cradle-to-cradle certified, we, as a cleaning product producing company, focused on packaging. Of course, strongly also looked into how our packaging would meet with the new criteria of the version 4. Which really was, as always, a complex but also a very helpful task to go through, because the broadness of the scope is extremely helpful to just learn more about where you have to improve and what you have to look more in depth. It obviously is necessary to have an established and dedicated team, but as Rachel already mentioned, you need to be really you need to go across the whole company in all functionalities. So again, it's something that comes by the doing. And I think that's also a general and very important message, that the doing is already a success, because you have to go through all these stages, sometimes also frustration, because you kind of have the feeling, okay, that doesn't really match with what you would find would be the best solution, and sometimes some struggle also. I mean, that's something that also I think belongs to it. But at the end, you need also a willingness to adjust and change, and to really to develop something new and something that is gonna be in the best sense sustainable and cradle to cradle oriented, and developing solutions already in the circular economy can be again, it can be very challenging, but it touches all elements of the cradle-to-cradle certification process, including also every element that you mentioned, Susan, so also the social fairness, for instance. I think it's something that, again, if you talk about success, then it's something that always comes with a lot of work. So I think this part, you just have to be candid about it. It's necessary, and on the other side, it's very rewarding.
Indeed. Okay. And Candi, could you please share with us what you think the biggest supply chain or system changes were that you had to undertake with version 4 implementation, and how can those systemic changes be best achieved?
So systemic change really happens best when there's processes and policies that are already in place that really establish clearly set expectations. So with regard to our supply chain, which is rather large and diverse, this really includes developing strong partnerships with those key suppliers and working with them to ensure that they understand the need and the value of the requirements that we expect of them, or more simply just understanding the why before the ask. So one of the greatest challenges of being part of the V4 pilot was really around the new requirements that were placed upon the suppliers. We have long incorporated cradle-to-cradle principles and our commitment to the UN Global Compact into our sustainable sourcing policy and procedures, but our suppliers were not really accustomed to some of the new information that was requested of them, in particular for Tier 2 supplier information and topics around social fairness. So for example, the V4 standard really goes beyond just setting the expectations for our supply chain and really moving into requiring social fairness risk assessments based not only on location, but the industries in which our suppliers operate for Tier 1 and even beyond into Tier 2 for silver. We currently have a manufacturing facility in China that was part of the certification pilot that we put through. And because of this, we were required to do a third-party social fairness audit at that facility. And in addition, we have some local Tier 1 raw material suppliers in China specific to just this facility. And during this first certification cycle, we had to go through and ask each of those suppliers if they had any third-party social fairness data that they could share with us. This will require us in the future to really engage with each one of those suppliers and leverage our partnerships there to help them really understand the need and the value to Shaw, really the why, before we lay out the requirements for them going forward, that they're going to be required to be audited at least every 2 years in order to meet the requirements of V4 Silver, which is really our ask. In addition to these new requirements, it requires us to push back beyond the Tier 1 suppliers and really exercise our partnerships in order to obtain additional information with regards to Tier 2 suppliers and their locations. And so many of our suppliers consider their raw materials, their suppliers, and their formulations to be exclusive and proprietary. We know we will need to work closely with these suppliers in order to gain their confidence in sharing their supply chain information with us or our third-party assessor. We're optimistic that through the ongoing relationships we currently have and strengthening those, as well as our suppliers' greater understanding of expectations moving forward, that this will become easier over time. The rigor of cradle to cradle is always challenging for supply chain engagement, but it's what makes the standards truly credible. That rigor is how we can help ensure that no matter where or by whom a product or an ingredient is made, it's held to the same high standards.
Great. That's a great segue into my next set of questions. And I'd like to discuss how third-party certification systems can bring value to your company and other companies in the transition to a circular economy. So starting with Tim, how do you track and measure circular implementation at Brenner and Mertz?
So we actually don't have this third-party certification. We track it on our own. Basically, we are led by the idea, and if I only take the technical cycle just to make it a little bit more visible and understandable. So if you look into packaging, our ambition is to have 100% recycled content, post-consumer recycled content in our packaging, and to have the packaging 100% recyclable. And we set a time frame until 2025, which is easy set, but it's very difficult to really make it run and implement that. So you just have to take the packaging and you pick not only the bottle is one major element. You look into the labeling, the printing colors, the pigments that are used, the glues. So in each and every detail, you have to look into where and how do you get to the fact of 100% circular concerning content and the recyclability or the circularity, and also match it with cradle to cradle. So the cradle to cradle is kind of one element that is very important, but we first have to go through this process of understanding that we need a full transition of the technical parts of the packaging, including every element. And once we went through this and developed solutions, we look into, so where can we and how can we go on in this innovative step forward, for instance, for the printing inks, and ask our supplier for the printing colors to look into cradle to cradle, which he did. And we found our supplier for the printing colors is Siegwerk, which is a German company, but it's a global player, and they developed this full set of printing colors, cradle to cradle gold certified, which was a great step again in the right direction, and it had this element of collaboration I spoke about. So again, it's not this third party, it's more we and ourselves have to go through this transition and develop solutions, and then try to find the right way how to kind of have it also cradle to cradle. But this is the complexity of this of the aim that we're going for. It needs kind of this base work. It needs a clear kind of aim. Where do we want to go? And it needs an understanding of our suppliers and the companies that we work together with, how fast we can achieve that. And again, we set the target for 2025, and of course, third parties with Cradle to Cradle play the role of have we done really the right thing? Have we developed a solution which matches with the Cradle to Cradle criteria? And our ambition is obviously that we want a Cradle to Cradle certification at highest level. So it needs a lot of kind of steps in between, where the third party is not the last solution. It's the last solution, but it's the last step. But before that, we have to go through the internal process of developing the right strategy. Thank you.
Yeah. And Rachel, could you please share with us how Cradle to Cradle Certified is guiding the way Mecho innovates and does business for a circular future?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important to mention that we've been using Cradle to Cradle for many years at this point, of course, still looking forward, but also looking back. And similar to what you were saying, Tim, it wasn't an actual certification when we started following the actual principles of what Cradle to Cradle stands for. We started working with them in the late 90s. Or I say them, it was really with Bill McDonough and his organization. And we look to reinvent essentially shade cloth, right? Traditional shade cloth is made with vinyl coated polyester yarns, and we were trying to, recreate that material with similar performance, but one that was PVC free and that could be circulated, right? Or, can be 100% recyclable. So So that was our first foray with Cradle to Cradle. We then started slowly incorporating Cradle to Cradle principles into all aspects of our design process. So, we really started and concentrated the most for many years on the material health side of things, especially when we, went to our hardware systems with Cradle to Cradle version 2 and then transitioned to version 3, and, use that as the material vetting guide. So, but here we are today, we're talking about version 4, and there are some pretty big changes in the standard, which I think, my co-panelists have outlined pretty clearly, especially with social fairness, and there are some really robust things that you kind of have to think about. For us, some of those changes were also especially pertinent for the circularity section. As a part of that circularity training that I already talked about, we talked about how circularity impacts different aspects of our product, especially hardware and motors. So as a result of that training, we are now including circularity into a gate review process. So especially for our electrical components, it requires that we set up communication and processes with our customers, but also with our suppliers. As Candi mentioned, it's really important to have that communication with your suppliers. In version 4, when you have an externally managed component, which our motor is, you have to comply with the platinum level of active cycling. So, these processes are still, they're still formulating internally. Our motors have a pretty long life of, a minimum, we'll say 10 years, and our products haven't even been out for close to 10 years yet. So we're still working on some of those take-back systems, but utilizing that Cradle to Cradle standard has started this very important conversation with all of the stakeholders that I've mentioned who have significant impact on that process. So by incorporating circularity into gate reviews, not just Cradle to Cradle, but the whole circularity process, it becomes a written requirement, and it also achieves more visibility by executives and other departments as well, so that people are really thinking about it from that early onset of product development all the way to execution. So you're getting from supply chain to customers, really, when you're thinking about that circularity process.
Thanks, Rachel. And for Candi, I have a question that's on many people's minds related to the Sustainable Development Goals. And could you please share with us how the Cradle to Cradle approach enables Shaw to lead on the fulfillment of those Sustainable Development Goals, in particular goal number 12, responsible consumption and production?
So Cradle to Cradle principles really align with many of the SDGs, including, as you know, goal 12 for responsible consumption and production. The Cradle to Cradle Certified Products Program really provides specific standards that create a pathway for many of the targets under the goal 12. And that includes environmentally sound management of chemicals and waste throughout their life cycle, sustainable management and efficient use of natural resources, reduction of waste through prevention, reduction, recycling, and reuse, and then establishing and promoting sustainable procurement practices. So there's lots of different targets within Goal 12 that Cradle to Cradle Products Program touches on. And within those, it affects a large portion of our business, from sourcing materials to how we actually operate within our facilities. Additionally, the products program provides us with a multifaceted approach towards continuous improvements and optimizations in the areas that align with many SDGs related not only to circularity, but also social fairness and climate change and water stewardship. It really provides us with a pathway and a driving force as we continue to further our efforts towards these goals.
Okay, thank you all. I'd like to now go to questions that are submitted by our audience. Let's see, first for you, Candi, what do you see as the key to moving a company from commitment to tangible action on the circular economy?
I would say it's really about taking the action to get started. What seems like it might be just one step or one product or maybe one process could really evolve into forward gains on a trajectory towards a circular economy. It's really essential to understand that making some progress is really better than waiting for perfection of a process. The momentum that you create really allows for both gradual and disruptive changes, which drives optimization and continuous improvement. And you never really know where the biggest technical or behavioral change will lie for your organization until you take those first steps.
Great. And the same question for you, Tim. And what do you think is key to moving a company from commitment to tangible action on the circular economy?
Basically, replicating what Candi said, because I think it's really the most and the essential step to go and to start. And then you will find out where your troubles are and where your weaknesses, if you want to call them, are. It's exactly the way that we proceeded with our Recycled initiative, because we started from scrap. Nobody really did what we wanted to do, and we just tried to figure out how to go forward. And since we didn't have anybody else that kind of supported us, we were on our own. And at the end, I mean, funny thing or fun fact, kind of, is that we're recycling experts right now, although we're a brand company. I mean, that's ridiculous that we need to become the recycling experts, because we just don't have solutions in the market that more or less helps us, and we're driving a little bit, and we're kind of not always very popular doing that. But if you want to change, then you need some pressure in the market. And in the end, I mean, we're a family business, and our family owner, he would also pick up the telephone and call another company's owner if it's a family company too, or he would speak with the CEO directly. And sometimes that's also helpful. So again, you have to start, and then you will figure out where you need to improve and develop solutions, and that's something that's really also, it's rewarding if you find that the company that originally didn't want to move anywhere is now one of the drivers in their industry. So I think that's cool.
Mm-hmm. Cool and encouraging. Thank you. Okay, a question for you, Rachel. Which innovations do you think would not have been achievable without the Cradle to Cradle framework for Mecho?
Yeah, so I started talking about this a little bit with the textiles earlier, right, for shade cloth. So I really don't know, had we not been inspired by Cradle to Cradle for that continuous improvement of the textiles, right? But it goes beyond that. So we created Eagleville. It's PVC free. It's made out of thermoplastic olefin, has similar performance and aesthetics to a standard PVC shade cloth, which is, what makes it so unique. But Cradle to Cradle, what it does, it doesn't let you stop there. You don't get to, pat yourself on the back and, okay, we're done, we did it, right? You have to keep going. And so, it's still not a perfect material. So in commercial buildings, you have to comply with building flammability codes. And in the United States, it's specifically an FP 701. In other parts of the country, you have M1, B1, things like that. So, but we are obviously focused, we're a US-centric organization. We do some work internationally, but, we were mostly focused on 701. And so we tried, upgrading the material, or I should say the chemistry of this product for many years to have safer chemistry inspired by that optimization of Cradle to Cradle to use, I don't want to say like better flame retardants, because none of them are really good, but you get the idea. And honestly, we weren't successful there. Cradle to Cradle did push us in that direction, but we weren't successful. But, we started looking at different materials. What are materials that are inherently flame resistant that may not need that same toxicity to plastic flame codes? And so we started doing a lot of investigation into polyesters, and we started working with a yarn type. It's a bicomponent polyester that requires minimal additives, and as a result, it's able to maintain its inherent flame retardancy and comply with NFPA 701 without any added chemical flame retardants. So that was released in 2017, 2018, and it's because of the Cradle to Cradle standard that we really assessed, what products we have, safer chemistry, and making sure that we were constantly optimizing and not really stopping at, one achievable moment.
Okay. Our next question we have, this is directed at all three of you. What is the incentive for companies such as yourselves to go through the rigor of a C2C certification beyond goodwill? Are you using it as a marketing differentiator for your consumers? I know you've all touched on that a little bit, but Candi, if you could please go first.
Yeah, so at Shaw, we are keenly focused on material health specifically of the materials in our product. And then with that, our responsibility for managing the resources, the energy, the water that our operations utilize, as well as a huge focus on social responsibility. So Cradle to Cradle really aligns with our strategies at Shaw. And from a business standpoint, it gives us a leg up, if you will, especially in the commercial space. So in commercial, when we're providing materials for commercial buildings that are going for LEED or for a WELL certification, Cradle to Cradle helps us contribute in many ways to those programs. Additionally, we market it broadly about our efforts and what we're doing, and it's our way as a private company, wholly owned by Berkshire Hathaway, to really put our message out there and let people understand what our strategies and initiatives are as it pertains to sustainability.
Okay, and Tim, what do you feel is the incentive for Werner and Mertz to go through this rigorous certification beyond goodwill, and how do you use it as a differentiator?
So as a brand in the fast-moving consumer goods, and if you take only the consumer business, so the B2C business, it's not so well known for the end consumer. So we cannot market it directly. We put it once in a while on a package because we want to also give the consumer kind of an idea. There's another labeling, and maybe some of them will go into the internet and try to find out what it's about. If you take the B2C business, then I would say it contributes to our brand value. We are most trusted brand in household cleaners for 20 years in a row. And so the consumer who trusts us, he also trusts us that we are so innovative and so much pioneering these cradle to cradle kind of solutions, closed loop solutions, and so on, that he would expect that. So that's kind of this, if a consumer is interested, and he can go on our internet site, and then he finds out, okay, we're also doing cradle to cradle. For our business to business sector, it's much more interesting because the buyer, the professional buyer, he has the time to figure out what's behind the cradle to cradle certification, can actually develop his own kind of criteria, how he decides on what product to buy. We're actually right now lobbying into improving this process of green public procurement so that it's even more interesting for companies to be cradle to cradle certified and to use this as a buying reason for the public buyer. So again, it's a mix. It comes out of our culture of sustainability, and holistic sustainability, and cradle to cradle reflects that perfectly. And it's, like I mentioned, the consumer expects us to do something like that, and the public procure, it helps him to understand better how far developed the solution is and how the label and which label we use, and that it's very advanced.
Okay, thanks. And Rachel, how is Mecho? What do they use as an incentive to go through the rigorous C2C certification process?
At this point, there's no going back, honestly. No, I'm just kidding. but I think it's important. We started out small. We started out, with one textile and slowly transitioned to more hardware systems. So it's slowly become and seeped part of our DNA, part of our culture, part of, how we do business. So when I say there's no going back, it's because it's really just, infiltrated how we design our processes and systems, right? So, but beyond that, why did we lean on this certification in particular, right? I think is kind of, the question. And I think it's because of the rigor and the accountability of it. Compared to other certifications on the market, it's third-party verified. You're assessing every homogeneous material down to 100 parts per million. So it's a reliable and trustworthy standard. So it's something that we can really, rely on, right? But also now and today, so we've been doing all this work, but what's great about it, the commercial market is a very educated market when it comes to product health, and understanding, recognizing cradle to cradle. So we do also get recognized. It gets asked for in LEED, it gets asked for in WELL. And so we do get recognized by third-party building standards as well. And for some of our complex assemblies that I mentioned that are very complex, cradle to cradle is the best way for us to ensure that we're getting the information that we need. It also does allow for some proprietary information, which sometimes when you're going 5 tiers back in a supply chain, you need to have some confidentiality. And cradle to cradle is, one of the best ways to ensure you're communicating the health impacts of the material, but you're not compromising proprietary information of a supplier. And so there's just a great process that, goes into it to ensure safety and health. But while still protecting, some suppliers' proprietary information. So there's a few reasons why we continue to really use the standard.
Okay, excellent. Okay, I would like to wrap up this panel session by asking you all one final question, and that is, which critical circularity action do you think companies need to take right now to emerge as leaders for tomorrow? And I'll start with you, Candi.
Yeah, so I think it's crucial that sustainability really needs to be embedded throughout the organization, but in particular, really within the product development stages, so that manufacturers are not creating products today that can be burdens on people during the use phase or at end of life. And that really includes a keen focus on ingredient selection, what goes into our products. We need to ensure that we avoid legacy chemical issues that could prevent cycling of those materials in the future, as well as selecting materials that are able to be cycled again and again and again. And while we can anticipate some advancements in technologies within the next 10 to 15 years that may create some new recycling solutions, we really can't go back and change the chemistry decisions that we made in the past. So it's imperative that we start now by ensuring that we're selecting ingredients that are safe for both people and the planet.
Okay. Rachel, what critical circularity action do you think companies need to take now to emerge as leaders for tomorrow?
Yeah, so, my comments actually, I'm going to talk about the built environment a little bit, just because that's where we sit. And clearly, the theme of this, it's circularity. That was, a big focus for us. And there are a few pain points when it comes to product recycling and reuse in the built environment that I've really encountered for my entire tenure here in this position. So, having a written standard is, I think, a great first step, but how can we then, bring that into action? I think we need to, gather different members of the built environment community, of the value chain, A&D working on specification, right? Something that we talk about all the time. Demolition starts at specification. Working with GCs, working with building owners for policies and accountability, and then also technology tools to make communication about circularity more pervasive. In the built environment market, manufacturing take-back programs may not always be the best method of product reuse. Some of my products have warranties of 25 plus years. So these are really long lasting products in buildings. The building stock can be 50, 60, 70 years old. And when you're looking at the individual products, different materials have different ways of cycling for, the best results. Some homogeneous materials, such as carpet tile, right, makes a really strong business case for take-back systems. Furniture, can be reused without any disassembly. There's a secondary market there, right? I don't really fit into any of those categories. So is it worth it to ship a shade system all the way back across the country to then just disassemble into individual parts? Or can we talk about creating policies to disassemble on site, right? As I said, there's no such thing as a standard shade size, so you can't just put one shade into another window or another building. So you have to really separate it and recycle it. So, I think the takeaway is like what types of policies and what does circularity look like in each sector? Who is needed in each of these conversations? And most importantly, what digital tools do we need to make this happen and to have this really come to fruition?
Okay, last but not least, Tim, what recommendations do you have for a critical circularity action for companies to take now?
Well, we first of all, thanks to Candi and Rachel, they already mentioned a lot of what I would have also put forward, but maybe let me focus on two things. One is take climate change. If we really want to really get anywhere in climate change and reducing the CO2 impact, we definitely need to start becoming more circular. And I have a slide that I show in my presentation since about 6 or 7 years. I thought I maybe would have to kick it out after 1 year, but I still show it. It's this linear economy. It is that we still live in a linear economy. We're talking a lot about circularity, and the reality is that, well, I would say almost all the companies are still very much into linear solutions. So we definitely need to find a way out of this linear, the self-optimization, this writing of SDG reports or environmental reports or whatever, and claiming to be already the perfect solution in the market. It's not true. It's not. We're not going and getting anywhere, and I might sound a little bit frustrated, but I just think that's the necessary thing to go to. It's become circular, and to really think about the end of the life. It's not the dump, it's not the incineration, it's the take back and use again and keep it in the cycle. It's exactly what Cradle to Cradle puts forward. It's basically this idea you have to understand maybe not, but try to follow it, and then you will figure out that you can find and develop super solutions. So get started and stop being linear, become circular.
Thanks, Tim. A great way to end that. So yes, let's hope that companies are able to make these commitments to take these actions. Okay, so that concludes our first panel session. Thank you again to our three panelists, Rachel, Candi, and Tim, for participating in this discussion today. And thanks again to all of you, to our audience, for joining us.